you see a seed sprout. Sometimes you can watch those little films and you see a seed sprout just underneath the earth, and it's like a cross section of the, and you see the seed, it sprout, and it puts a sprout up of, the sprout goes down into the earth, and then all these tiny little roots start spreading out very quickly, and they make tiny little filament roots. They stretch into the earth very quickly. It's like the first thing that happens, the seed sprouts, and then the roots take hold. And that is quite literally what Taurus is. Well, Taurus is an earth sign, and one of its principles is to take hold of something, because it's about firming something up. And that's why it's a fixed earth sign. So the fixity is because it is the second zodiac sign in the season of spring. So the ancients would call this a fixed or a solid sign. That is to say, once spring has started, the month of Aries, it then goes into Taurus, and that is about when nothing changes, okay, for the month, because the spring season has started, and therefore nothing changes in the middle of the season. So it's fixed or solid. Later on, once the sun, after May 20th, the sun will go into Gemini, and that will be the next lesson. Today we're focusing on Taurus. So the principle of Taurus is to take the earth and to use the earth. Okay, so when you look at things like Taurus, then you're starting to focus on the concept of let's think of some character images first. Okay, so with Taurus, you're looking at the idea of the builder, or the producer, or the nature lover, or natural artists, people who work with things. Taurus is a very physical sign. You're looking at people like gardeners, landscapers, maybe the sort of people who really attune themselves to nature, like, for example, druids. Providers. Taurus is a very providing sign. And it's connected to things like when people refer to, say, Earth Mother, would say, oh, yes, that person's really like an Earth Mother. But they're looking at the qualities or the nature of Taurus in that person. It's people who love to interact with nature, to really feel at one with nature. And it's also about the appreciation of life. It's hugely about appreciation. So and with things like that, then it would be music lovers, food lovers, the art lovers. And so with Taurus, it's about being open to the physical world such that they can listen to the flow of something and experience that sense of silence and peace. So the idea of appreciation of the physical world around them, the five senses, is a physical, corporeal sense of self, the body. And Taurus enjoys exploring and being that. People with planets in Taurus really like a material, physical world. It's so important to them. And that's how they're in, if you like, that's how they reach their perfection, or they get their enlightenment, through the physical world. They like to, in a way, stay very present. They tend to be quite here and now. That feels good, Taurus might say. I'm enjoying this, Taurus might say. So they're the sort of people who will be doing something on purpose. Okay? Taurus is very purposeful. I'm going to do that because I might like it. 2, it's going to be good. 3, he'll make something of it. These are sort of how Tauruses act and think. So they are people who would harness something or who would utilize something. They are the sort of people who would be sustaining in something. And they like to nurture. They like to have a sense of beauty. It's all earthiness as well. Okay. So they are very aware of the rhythmic flow of nature. So that's why you get the nature lovers, like the gardeners, etc. They actually usually tend to have an inborn sense of inner peace. That everything's flowing around them. They don't have to be disturbed. And then that can make you think maybe of the archetype of the bull. It'll sit there, it'll be chewing the cud. It can rain, it can storm, it can wind, it can, the bull just sits there in the field, doesn't move. So they like their tranquility, they like their pleasure, very, very much so. So they are Taurus, people with planets in Taurus, sun sign Taurus, but also all the planets. They are the sort of people who are fully in the body. Okay, they experience the idea of fertility and pleasure. They like to have that deep sense of belonging to life. So those are the kind of things that we see with Taurus. Okay, now a few more rules based on Taurus with astrology. We have to follow the rules because there's a lot of guidance as to what's what, and so we get things right, if you like. But let's look a bit more at the idea of fixed signs, okay? And I'll be going over these again. I have to do these each time. I'm going to be looking at these all the time, because to understand astrology is to it's not so much memory, it's just to understand nature. So when I talk to you like this about Taurus, like I talked to you about Aries last time, you're understanding what Taurus is, and then you'll see it. And this is the key to astrology, is when you see it, you know it in yourself. It's the knowing of process or understanding the way people work or people are or things are. And it doesn't, sometimes it's about getting to grips with the sign, or with the signs in that way. So Taurus, or fixed signs particularly, are very focused on the idea of stability and durability. So they don't like change very much if they can avoid it. So there's quite a lot of conservatism and inertia, right? The buck does stop there with a Taurus, right? It'll be like, yeah, okay, something's moving and it slows down. Taurus, because naturally they're quite cautious, they're quite defensive, they are persistent, and they are very much into the idea of security. So they have a very strong drive, security. They have a sense of continuity. So if a Taurus starts something up and gets it going, there can be a continuity to that. So that's the idea of sustaining something. They're very focused on defense and self-control, and they are stubborn, and they also react very slowly to something. They can be extremely cautious. So what you often get with Taurus, or planets in Taurus, is the idea of rigidity and the difficulty in giving something up. That can be diet, it can be habit, it can be all sorts of things, right? And so they stick to something because if they've enjoyed it, they don't want to let it go. So this is very much the idea of the fixity of Taurus, okay? And as you'll see, that is reflected in other zodiac signs later on as we go through the module. You'll understand this in more detail. It's a Taurus thing tends to be, has a weight to it, it has a solidity to it. So it's not easily moved. So Taurus builds a really strong foundation, and that makes you think of the nature again. The sprouts under the earth, those filigree roots grow out, and as soon as they're out there spreading through the earth, they start to thicken up, right? But it's thicker, it has a density to it. And it's the spreading of the life, or the appreciation of life, as it moves downwards and inwards. And that, of course, is Taurus as its nature. It an inward, downward sign. So when you're experiencing Taurus, maybe a Taurus transit, noticing things go in, it's receptive. It receives and goes in and down. That's very earthy. So it also has a function that ties it to the idea of maintenance and conserving. Okay, so it's conserving and preserving. And in that way, then has more long-lasting. Okay, so that's Taurus as well. So very solid, very foundational, very establishing. Okay, and in a way, Taurus is the sign that is the most patient of them all. Taurus will always wait out. They're very patient and they wait a long time. So, got to look a little bit more now at the etymology of Taurus, okay, just to get some ideas about the roots of the words, because then when you see words in real life around you and people hear people speaking them, you start to get the idea of what Taurus holds in it. Again, it is a holding sign as well. So the first is the actual root meaning is the phrase STA. Okay, very Taurus, all right. And that has the sort of European, if you like, root meaning of that is to stand, to set down, to make, to be firm. Okay, and therefore it's linked to things like a place or a thing that is standing. So you get the idea of many words based around that. For example, stable, stage, be a stalwart, stamen in the flower, stance, taking a stance, standing, staunch, standards, starboard, stasis, state, it's the state. The status, staunchiness, stay, stead, steadiness, the steer. Now we'll go back to the one in a minute. It's a really interesting one, the steer. You have things like stool, like sitting on a stool, or a store, like the food store, or stud, like, as in nature or agriculture. Subsist, substance, substitute, substitution, superstition, system, understand. These are all very Taurian words. Okay. So then you could go to the word stan, S-T-A-N. You'd have things like a lot of countries named after Stan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., and which is the idea again, where the place is or where one stands. And then you have things like the words stamp, stampede, I think of the cattle. You have stance, staunch, staunchion, stand, and to stand alone. You have root stat, S-T-A-P. This is things like standing, stationary. It's also thermostat, as in temperature or the heat rising. It's the idea of the heliostat, which is something about measuring the instrument that causes about sun measurement. Then there's things like a gyrostat, hydrostatic, photostat, the word stash, starve, statecraft, statehood, stateless. These are things that just ideas where you can see these links. Now the word steer go back to steer, which is a noun, is actually an Old English word for a young ox. Steer. And immediately I think of the ring in the bull's nose. How do you make it? How do you steer the bull? You put the ring in its nose because they won't move otherwise. It's the only thing that makes them move is to pull them right from their very front. Right? That's the only thing, And so you put the rope through the thing, and they go. Right? They move. So that's the sense of like it's a larger domestic animal, steer. Then you have things like a steeple or a steeplechase. And you have a steeplejack. You have steepness, like how steep is it? It's linked to steer. You have something that is steering wheel. You have to grip it tight, right, to make it move, to turn it. That's a very earthy thing. The action of gripping something tight to hold onto it, and that's why it's called a steering wheel, to steer the boat. With the wheel. Reins, are steering things. And then you have even things like, you can look at, those solid, very stable things like a dinosaur, a stegosaurus, for example. To get the idea. And then you have toro, which is Spanish for bull. The toro is again directly from Taurus. You have things like to torment or a tormentor or a tornado, or the fury of a tornado, for example. It's like the fury of a bull. It's devastating. Quick acting. It stays placid. The tornado appears, it whizzes along, and it's vanished again. And it's like, well, what happened there? It was like a tornado. Torpedo. You don't see it until it hits you. Torpidity. Torpor. So these are all words that are linked and connected to Taurus, okay? And when you just think about those, hopefully I'm giving you this idea. Really ultimately we're looking at standing firm on something. Okay? So this brings us to the earth sign. What Taurus is the earthiness of things. And has links to the idea of the melancholic temperament, which is, again, the idea of being very internalized. Temperament was a whole art in medicine, and it deserves. It's too much of a big subject to get into now. The idea of melancholia is quite earthy. Okay? So there's a sense with earth signs of having a great focus on practical and functional action. So in a way, Taurus is a very constructive nature, and like the producer, I'll put this down here, and then later on I can add something to it, and a bit more, and a bit more, and a bit more, and it becomes something. So they like and appreciate solidity. They like to express themselves in very analytical or functional, very good for Taurus. And they tend to be very organized and very pragmatic. It is the element of earth as well. So there's a sense of like how to be practical, how to be methodical. A very Taurus word, method. So the 3 earth signs, I'll be going into those in another module, in another lesson. And they are also, so it's Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. The Taurus is one of a triplicity of 3, and that's the first time we've heard that word, I think, but we'll be getting into that later on. So it's the idea of the triplicity of the elements. Now, Taurus is a feminine sign because it is receptive, inward, okay? So it is a very feminine nature. It is nocturnal, is of the earth, is melancholic, which is cold and dry. So is fixed or solid. It is ruled by the planet Venus. So when you combine the earth element with the fixed mode, then you get a conservative, stable, tenacious nature. The idea of steering again, holding the tenacity of something, holding on to it, right? And so, but then you also get the idea of having got it, there can then be inertia because they won't let it go. And so there's a tendency, therefore, towards stubbornness. Is quite a possibility with Taurus. However, ruler of Taurus is Venus. And Venus is known for its graciousness and for its tolerance. The Taurus is a patient sign. It waits and waits. And therefore, we can then look at more into Taurus. We can say, well, how do we go further into Taurus, with this idea of what it is? You've got the idea of being, when you think of a Taurus in a good way, they're calm, it might be a little bit ponderous. Sometimes they like to mull things over a bit, like chewing the cud. They have a tendency towards maybe sometimes a bit lazy because they're enjoying life a lot. And they tend to be very pragmatic, practical. They center on comfort and satisfaction. Very important. So they tend to be more reactive to external stimuli rather than reactive to it. So, or they tend to be, reactive to external stimuli rather than to initiate the action. They like, as I said, seed sprouts in the earth, it goes into the earth, and then it's building into it. So the Aries initiates the action, Taurus stabilizes it. And so that is very much where, the idea of Taurus. So Taurus likes peace, likes stability, and it is a sign that is very much to do with steadfastness. So as Taurus moves into various as it grows in life, as it were, then you get a sense of it being very, it shows the stability of character and the sense of purpose. So Taurus is the steadfast mind, and it tends to be unshaken in adversity because it won't move far, because it stays in one place, and it has persistent, the very key Taurus word, quiet persistent sometimes. Although saying that, of course, the bull, when roaring, it makes a very loud noise. It can be as loud as the lion, which is another fixed sign, which we'll get on to later. So Tauruses tend to refuse to be hustled or hurried or pushed along. They don't like that. They don't like to be pushed. You don't, into anything that could be considered like a false position. All right, they're kind of like, I'm staying here, I'll stick with what I'm doing. And that's how you can hear them say things like that. So they tend to understand the importance of system or method and order. They tend to be the sign that shows or enjoys routine and regularity. And they can be very much the idea of what can be built out of this. So they show constructive ability. And they get inspired, and they love the love of family and the love of a good relationship. That really spurs them on. And so that's where they show their most patience and their most perseverance. And people marvel at them for that, because they are spurred on by the relationships, because that's a very Taurian thing. So there can be towers of strength, and they show often much integrity. You can always kind of rely on a Taurus. They're reliable. And they tend to be, you'll find them in agricultural and rural pursuits. So they're farmers and gardeners and nature lovers. They're cultivating and garnering. They tend to try and make things happen in their slow and steady way. They're very good with practical constructive work, so you'll find them on the building site, or you'll find them over the draftsman's board as well. You know, they can be like graphic designers and things. They tend to do things quite leisurely, and they don't mind being directed around by other people, as long as it's productive. So Tauruses can be led, and again, that makes me think of this idea of the ring in the nose. You can tell them what to do. And their feet don't tend to lose touch with the ground. They're very solid. You know, they want that terra firma. You know, they love that. And they tend to know where they stand on something. The Taurus, okay? So they're in that place, and then they're like, right, I know where I'm at. That's where I'll stay, and I'll make that a good place. I'll make that secure. I'll make that constructive, and that is how Taurus can be. It's difficult to ruffle a Taurus, okay, and because they are tolerant, they're warm of heart. They want everybody to enjoy things as well as they do, right? So you'll get them doing very creative things. So Taurus will be making music or singing or being an artist or a sculptor, you know, working with earthy things. Clay, for example, or stone, very earthy things. Or they might be a chef, cook, you know, and really excel in that because it's the enjoyment and pleasure of working with things to produce something other people enjoy as well. So this is very Taurus. So they often have quite a leisurely way, and they're quite tranquil. They tend to be they tend to have a healing touch, a Taurus. So you'll find them in places where they can nurture others and heal others. They tend to, because they can't have a calming influence. So, you know, what you find with Taurus, and this in the most ordinary and real sense of the word, is that they are very self-centered. Now, that's not meant to be a bad word in this particular case, or it's actually that they are centered on themselves. So, and in such a way, that's how they then move outwards into life. So there's a sense of, you know, sometimes they don't see other people's points of view. They see their own point of view, and then they would impress that on others. And that's quite fixed earth. So it would be like, so that's where you get the idea of sometimes the steadfast nature and the persistence can turn into stubbornness. You know, well, I'm not going to do that because I don't see that point of view. So they stay in their place. And you know, so there sometimes can be quite what could be called obstinacy, which again is the bull that doesn't move. If you think of like a cattle market, you know, the idea where the bull doesn't change its position, well, you can't do anything to make it move. And you hear it in stories and legends and myths, you know, that it doesn't move, you know, and things like that. So there's often they don't like change, and it can be quite a strong disinclination to strenuous exertion as well. You know, it sounds like, you know, you can get the bull to do things like plough the field, for example, but there's also, it has to be done slowly and steadily because it's a gradual thing, you know, and sometimes, you know, they enjoy their lives quite a lot, you know, so there can be a marked note for potential for self-indulgence, but it's all about, and they would tell you how much they're enjoying it as well. These chocolates are great. Why don't you have some too? You know, and it's kind of like a Taurus thing, you know, or you're gonna, you know, will you, you know, sit down and enjoy this with me, or do these things with me, you know, because Tauruses would be asking for people to share things with them sometimes because they want other people to enjoy it too. And so there's a sense of, you know, being very faithful in life, you know, with others. They're very loyal, incredibly faithful. They endure, you know, they're very enduring, should I say, in their friendships and their affections. So even though there can be neglect or rebuff or these things that would normal people, other people would say, well, Taurus would be persistent and loyal, true to the cause, because Taurus sticks with something. So, they have sometimes a dogged nature, something, they'll always be at your side, right? Because they have that beautiful sense of loyalty, guaranteed, should we say, and sometimes, they can be quite overly amorous or sensual, but it's all about that earthy or physical element that they're exploring, and so they like things to have a tangible form to things, and when you look out for a Taurus, you can see sometimes that they can be quite shy and quite self-conscious in their own way, because they do have quite a very strong sense of self-awareness, particularly, and they do sometimes show quite a lot of humility as well. So when it comes to things like families and love and relationships, Taurus make great mothers. Okay, because it's a feminine sign, it's very nurturing, and they tend to have a natural kindliness and warmth of heart that blossoms and helps to bring things up. Things can grow with them, the parental instinct, and so there's a very sort of lot of delight in the enjoyment of fertility and the growth of something, or growing up, or bringing children up. So there's a general sense of the sensuous nature, soft and sensuous nature, a gentleness and compassion. They tend to, once they've settled on a decision, they tend to stick with it. That's also very Taurus. So there's a few things there that give you some ideas about Taurus, okay? And ultimately, they are here to really claim their place on the physical plane, all right? In the world of material, corporality, and existence, that's where they're at their strongest. Other signs do other things, but that is how Taurus gets its accomplishment, is by saying, I'm enjoying life, I'm getting into life. And that's how they do things. With planets in Taurus or angles in Taurus, you'll see that, you'll notice that. And so you've got to, or be aware of that, note how they grow and how they develop and how they appreciate life. They're contemplative in their mind. They think deeply. They would enjoy telling a story. They take it slowly. And then this happened, and then that happened, and wait till tomorrow, and I'll tell you a bit more. And they're a bit like that, because it's all about the long wait with Taurus, to be patient with something. And it would be like sort of people who could be having a solidity of structure with permanence and durability. And that's in the character, very much in the character. So often you see Taurus as being very solid, being very present. They have a sense of quite strong proportion to them. You can sense a Taurus by their very sense of proportion or weight, or there's that solidity, that groundedness. So they might have quite heavy steppers generally, or quite just sensual stepping. You're moving in that direction of that they have a solid presence. Not necessarily like the bull, because there's many types of different Tauruses. Some are very, quite, what should we say, willowy, but there are very solid ones as well. And so it's about, they have a sort of generosity in their height and shape and build. And they tend to be quite broad-shouldered. They tend to be sometimes quite dark eyes, quite heavy eyelids, quite pronounced eyelashes, usually very thick hair, and tends to have one kind of, maybe not so much coils or spirally hair, but they might have one loop in the hair, one, that kind of shape of is their style. You know, you can see that in them. Voice, and now the voice is so important with Taurus because Taurus rules the throat and the neck. So Taurus are very good singers, and it's a good place to find them in the choir, fronting rock groups, fronting musical groups, playing instruments and singing, because the voice tends to be very round and soft and sensual, and in speech and in song. It's very pleasing to the ear. A Taurus will please the ear with how it sings, and so, you know, it's like the idea of all singing together is you know, the choral expression is very Taurian, and they tend to be the sort of people who sweet and musical, because it's that appreciation of things and how they can communicate. So that's again that sort of sense of being productive, if you like, but through the use of the body or the voice. And then, of course, you've got the Taurus. You've got the yoke of the bull around the neck. For some Tauruses, you can see the very thick, heavy set neck. You know, where the head sits firmly on the body, as it were. It's a very kind of solid base, and that might be someone with Taurus angles, like an ascendant or something like that. But there's a sense that only the thing that upsets Taurus is the inability to see other points of view and things. So when they stay in their place and they don't move, the inertia and the self-indulgence, and therefore maybe the ignorance, the inability to see something else, that can upset them in the long run. And so there may be that you know, it's easy for a Taurus to get overly enjoy things, you know. So things, you know, they can overdo things sometimes, and that can be one of their problems. And so the overabundance needs to be guided. Sometimes, you know, it might be like, Taurus, you know, slow down a bit, or something like that. And then they understand that when they're told that, maybe, you know, like try to, you know, not do too much of one thing. But ultimately, they like to give things out freely and generously for the pleasure and benefit of others as well. They can be very generous, Taurus, and you're likely to see that these are the sort of people who enjoy a peaceful and leisurely walk. They like to enjoy rural scenery, for example, and nature. They like to see things growing, and they are singing is a good thing. They cultivate things as well. So there's quite a bit there about Taurus for you, all right? And I hope that gives you plenty of insight. You know, maybe it helps you understand or see people a bit more. We've looked at the etymology. We've looked at some of the core natures of that sign, and we've looked at it in nature as well. How it takes root. Taurus takes roots and builds itself into the ground. As you'll see in the next module, the next lesson in the module, we'll be doing Gemini. We'll talk about that next week, but that is a different. Once the roots have been established, then something else can happen. So now I'm going to show you some charts. Some of you might not be completely familiar with charts, but the way to do astrology really is to dive right on in there, you know. And I can every time you see a chart, you'll learn a little bit more. And so just see it and start to, you know, you'll see gradually we're moving. It's a gradual process to move forward into chart. Okay, so I'm going to show you some charts now. I'm going to do a share screen, and I've lined up some celebrities with, I think, some strong Taurus qualities, so that you can get an idea of. Hopefully, you'll recognise all these people. So James Brown, soul singer, okay, and used to dance on the stage at the Apollo. Very exacting and appreciated his music. And he was a sun in Taurus with Venus, which rules Taurus. So he's the Sun-Venus conjunction in Taurus. This is the symbol for the sun here. I hope you can see the pointer moving around. This is the symbol for the sun, which, of course, you'll be learning or have already learned because if you did planets modules. The Venus here is the ruler of Taurus, And this is the symbol for Taurus, which is the circle with the horns of the bull on top. Quite open to receive a symbol. It shows that it's open to receive things, you see. So the idea of the horns of the bull there. And this is, a very James Brown thing. He would sing a lot about sensuality and love and all sorts of things like that in a very Taurian way. And when you think of a picture of him, think of what he looked like. And can you see the bull? I mean, note that down now. And later on, have a look on Google at a picture of James Brown, and you'll see how much he looks like a bull. And that will give you a very clear indicator of what he was like, And there you have the sun and the Venus on the midheaven. He was known for that very solid, almost indefeatable kind of power that he had, where he could hold the stage in a very quite, I used to think about things like satisfaction was one of his words. He'd be like satisfaction and things like that. And that he'd chant these sort of words in his music, and he had his band backing him, and very, very sensual. So that's the Sun Venus Taurus. James Brown. Another Sun Venus in Taurus. I don't have his birth time because no one knows his birth time. Mark Zuckerberg, the supposed inventor of Facebook, has a Sun Venus in Taurus. Of course, say that because Facebook was produced, and then they had a massive court battle over who actually owned it and who actually created it. And he did he did win the battle, but he did have to do a huge payout. But Facebook is a very productive thing. It's about relationships, which is very Taurus, and Venus, and so you have a Sun Venus, and now of course he's a billionaire, and he's one of the leading tech giants in the world. Taurus cultivates things; it lets things grow, and he excelled in making Facebook grow. So that's a very Taurus thing. We've got the Sun and Moon together in Taurus. Perfect. This is such a great choice. It's Joanna Lumley, the actress. She was born with the new moon in Taurus, and it's right on her descendant. And straight away, you just think of some of those classic roles like Patsy in the sitcom that she did with Jennifer Saunders, and absolutely fabulous. That's right. And that Sun Moon in Taurus was a very Patsy character, because it's appreciative and it things to excess. Make people laugh, of course. But she also, she's and the thing about what you need to do with Taurus is to understand that voice. Okay, he has got an incredibly resonant voice. He speaks with dignity, very fixed earth, and it's quite slow, and well pronounced, and that is a very Sun. A moon in Taurus, as you'll see with all of these people, all the charts I'm going to show you today, they all have that kind of Sun Moon, or rather, they all have the Taurus planets that bring out the voice. I want you'll understand that you tune into Taurus by their voice sometimes. You'll hear it and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's a kind of fixed voice, right? You'll see what I mean as we go through the signs. You'll understand it, and the resonance of it, or the slowness of it, or the tolerant, patient voice that keeps going, and things like that. Joanna Lumley, just think of the voice. Then we've got Wilcox, the pop singer, Sun Moon in Taurus with Mercury in Taurus as well, and outrageous fashion style, and today making great presence on Facebook by showing off her charms, and married to Robert Fripp. They're all over the Facebook at the moment. And so they have a very productive life. They show people around their lovely house. It's all very Taurusy. It's all very, we've got this, we've got that. We enjoy our material things. That's very Toya Wilcox and Robert Fripp. I don't know if you see if you know what I'm talking about here, but they have a very strong Facebook presence, and they've got hundreds of thousands of people really liking their life, their lifestyle, and it's kind of like Sun Moon Taurus, If the moon is the dwelling place, you know, and she's still singing, you know, and that's very kind of a bit like how she was, you see, very colourful as well. She used to be very style. She used to have a very unique style in the 1980s, and so yeah, so interesting, you know, to see all that. Daniel Day-Lewis, incredible character, method actor. Yeah, method. The word method. He doesn't act when he chooses his film roles. He chooses them really carefully, right? Very steady and slow, very patient, waiting for the right role that he thinks he can play, and then he wins an Oscar for it. Right? He's won how many Oscars? I've got like one of the most winning. Got 3, I think, something like that. Every time he does something, look at all the planets in Taurus here. You know, you've got the Moon, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, the Node, South Node. So this is someone who does things incredibly slowly, like the idea, and it is called method acting. You know, so he takes it very slowly, but then he does it with great aplomb. You know, and the idea of aplomb as well. That's a weighty thing, isn't it? Aplomb is like a weight to it. You know, it's quite a good word for him, I think. So there's that, you know, all those planets in Taurus. He tends to, you know, come out top every time because he puts across. He takes the character on in a very, I suppose, let's use that word sensual again. You know, he ponders deeply, think on how that character might be, and then plays it in such a way that people are just like, it makes it so good. You know, so that's why he gets what he gets. We have Pierce Brosnan, who is a Sun and Mercury in Taurus. The voice, very the James Bond, one of the James Bond voices. That very smooth, Taurus-y kind of voice. It's quite slow again. You compare that to Joanna Lumley's voice, and you can start to see that, right? You can start to hear that quality coming through. And also Daniel Day-Lewis, of course. So think of the Mercury and Taurus there as the speaking voice that will be slow and quite deep, resonant, you know. And Joanna Lumley has the similar, but in a feminine way. So it's the Sun and Mercury in Taurus for Piers Brosnan. Then it's a great choice. You know, the pop singer Craig David, right? Look at how many planets in Taurus he's got. We don't have the birth time. That's a classic, right? Mars, Sun, Chiron, Venus, and Mercury. Okay, a whole stellium of planets in Taurus, and all his lyrics are about enjoying things. If you listen to his lyrics, it's all about styling, the fashion, things to wear, food and drink, hanging out in the hot tub, doing all that. So he's so Taurus, right? He's so Taurus. And it's the style of Craig David. And here's the thing, his voice has even had a comedian, whole country going, Craig David. It's the voice, right? So he had, you know, I mean, you can't get it better than that, really. It's a classic, right? And look at how many planets he's got in Taurus. It's incredible, right? So, and everything is about, and it's the way he does it, you know, just the way he is. And he's called not so much a songwriter as a producer, right? People call him a producer in the studio and in it, you know. He's not so much like Craig David, music producer. So you know, there's a very sort of Taurus, a strength of Taurus there. And we've got Brenda Jackson, okay, actress, highly awarded actress. I mean, won some of the highest awards in acting, and very no nonsense. Always been completely no nonsense. Got into politics, and I think she's still in the House of Commons now. I mean, she's been in there for like God knows how long. She won't ever give up her seat. She's a Taurus, you know. So you know, I think she's probably been there for about 6 or 7 general elections or so. She's been there since the 80s, you know, and you know, Tauruses don't give something up once they get it. You see, so they've got Venus, Uranus, Sun, Mars. You know, long-standing MP. You know? we could bring a bit of that 11th house there just for that. It's a community or a group. She's Hampstead, isn't she? MP for Hampstead. But that's a Taurus there, you see. Absolutely no nonsense. And when you hear her speak, oh my God, he speaks with, again, dignity and authority. It's very slow and powerful, and she speaks quite haughtily, actually, in her own way. And again, compare it to Joanna Lumley, Piers Brosnan, Craig David, and all you're starting to get this idea of the power of the voice, and so Peter Jackson, and an actress too, the power of the voice on stage. She actually made her fame in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, by being a stage actress, and then she did television afterwards. But it was the stage that she really showed herself to be her strength. And then we've got Princess Anne's daughter, Zara Phillips, who has Mars, Chiron, and the Sun in Taurus in her 7th house. Mars would be, of course, nature lover. She's always on horses, very farming, agricultural, rural type, member of the royal family. And she married that rugby player who looks, talk about a fixed earth kind of character of a husband. He's like solid, like a brick wall, right? Something like that. That's the Mars Sun in Taurus in her 7th house. You see, so that's that kind of what she wanted to marry. She married him, and therefore the house of marriage has got her Mars and Sun in Taurus, and that sort of indicates, and you can look around and you say, so what would be the thing that got her marry him? Well, she's got planets in Taurus in her 7th house. Classic for is Adele, okay, who has Jupiter, the planet of good luck and good fortune, conjunct her Sun in Taurus. Okay, so here's the girl who was brought up in South London, West Norwood, and did a demo on MySpace and got noticed from MySpace. Okay, and now has rocketed to the top. And probably has more resources than she knows what to do with. Sun, Jupiter, and Taurus, you see. It manifests, it produces, it builds, it creates, it cultivates, and it grew something big for her with her music. Again, it's the voice, it's a singing voice. And as you can see there, though, it's not been an easy life when you've got 2 grand squares in your chart. We'll get onto all this later on, but this is a great chart to study for that very effect. She hasn't had an easy life with 2 grand squares. See, so when she made it famous, she's like, we think it's very, it's like, wow, all the pressure she went through, it resulted in what she's got now. That was a lot of pressure. Sun, Jupiter, and Taurus, opposite Pluto. But we'll talk about this another time. But that is a very big thing for her there. So, and here is an absolutely brilliant choice for a Taurus. Okay, we have Melania Trump. Okay, she is so perfect, right? The choice for a Taurus. This is someone with Sun Saturn conjunction in Taurus and Mercury and Venus in Taurus. Okay, so the Sun Saturn is who is in control of who, right? With Sun Saturn, you might say, oh yeah, she married this really old guy. Yes, she did. Who is actually in control, right? And again, a funny voice. She's got a very noticeable and distinctive voice. Okay, and this is the trappings of all the good life and the luxury. Taurus loves it. Taurus loves it, right? So she's happy, relishes the gold apartment that Donald Trump gave her. You've seen those pictures of them in the gold apartment. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. She loves that sort of stuff. But you've got 4 planets in Taurus. She's all about that. She was also a jewelry designer. So she does beautiful things. some people might question the fact what she did to things like the White House rose garden, for example, which is interesting because that's a very Taurus thing, because Taurus rules roses, or Venus rules roses. And so, you know, that was an interesting sort of, I remember, and that's the thing that stuck out in my mind recently was what she did to the White House rose garden before she left. Still, that's a very interesting combination of Sun Saturn there, okay? Because Saturn would be one who provides boundaries, order, and control and discipline. Is it her? Because in her chart, she's got Sun Saturn. Donald Trump doesn't have Sun Saturn. Donald Trump has his major thing is Sun Uranus, which is a little bit of the rebel, right? When he's married to a Sun Saturn, who's in control, you know? So it's kind of interesting, right? And so with Mercury and Taurus there, that's again that voice, which is a very interesting voice. Okay, very, very interesting. And I would even say it has qualities about it that are very quite, you know, it has tonality to it that's very interesting, you know. And that's Mercury, the speaking, but or the Venus in the sound of the voice, you know, or the potential of that of a pleasing, possibly quite a pleasing voice. And then finally we have Uma Thurman, who is another Sun Saturn in Taurus, also with Mercury in Taurus. And of course, Saturn is the planet of the Grim Reaper. You know, Saturn's the planet of the Scythe. And she got featured twice in those movies, the Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2, with the samurai sword, slicing people's heads off all over the place, is the Scythe bearer, you know. And there she has a Sun-Saturn conjunction. But also in Pulp Fiction, she had to survive the whole scene, which was very shocking at the time. People were truly shocked, you know, at the adrenaline scene. And that famous line where they're dancing and it's like waxworks with a pulse, which I always thought was very Taurus. You know, it's kind of like something that's solid and stable, like a wax figure, you know, captured or unmovable, you know. And I always think of it, you know, like very Taurus. So she's a very Taurus character, Uma Thurman. And, but that Sun Saturn is, you know, it's an interesting combination there. And of course, how Hollywood actors tend to play their roles. The roles, see them very much in their charts. Always with actors, you can see the roles that they play strongly in their charts. In fact, actually, if you go back to Daniel Day-Lewis, and he played that role, he played in that movie where he was the oil prospector digging into the earth. So he was digging. He set up the whole oil. He won an Oscar for it, and it was all about the trappings of money and resources and the power of money and how it actually destroyed him in the movie. And that's issues of Taurus, you know. So it was like too much power. You know, he'd created too much power and it ruined him. And he became vengeful and envious, and it destroyed his family and all these different things. Big themes in the movie were extremely Taurus, you know. So that's quite interesting that he's got all those planets there, and of course he won an Oscar for it. So. So I hope that you found and enjoyed that excursion with firstly of celebrity charts into Taurus. I hope that you understand and see that as well. You know, in the world around you, if you look at Taurus, you know, just to quickly round up there, the idea of what Taurus is. You know, think about it as being part of the body that is to do with the neck and the throat. Okay, it's very much to do with someone who would have a short and full stature, maybe large shoulders, a wide forehead, possibly big eyes and a mouth, you know, big eyes, big mouth maybe, quite dark hair, quite large hands. Tauruses have quite large hands. In terms of where you can see it in the world, it's places like stables on farms, isolated pastures, level lands or recently trimmed lands, where corn or wheat is planted. In the home, it's basements and low ceilings. It's like a stable. low rooms, and it rules quite a lot of different countries. It can be seen. The energy of Taurus can be seen in Poland, Sweden, Russia, Ireland, Switzerland, Persia, mainly around Iraq, Cyprus, the Cyclades Islands. There we go. There's a few Taurian places, generally places like there's a couple of tourist cities, Bologna, Salerno, both in Italy, aren't they, I think, and Istanbul and Nantes in France. So there's some very touristy places as well to think about. And I hope you enjoyed that lesson.